Pick it up. Boy, I said pick it up before I teach you what happens when people like you get slick with authority. The words didn't just echo. They froze the air. Every sound inside Lennox convenience store died at once. The humming fridge, the soft beeps of the register, the quiet chatter of customers. Everything went silent as Officer Kyle Brennan, an off-duty NYPD veteran, towered over a man who hadn't said a word back. The man was Jamal Thompson, dressed in a gray suit, still wearing the calm dignity of someone used to commanding a courtroom. But right now, no one saw that. They saw only his skin. His credit card lay on the floor between his shoes, knocked from his hand moments earlier, and this officer, his face flushed red with misplaced power, was ordering him to kneel for it. Before going into the story, tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this story a like, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Jamal stood still, his pulse slow, his eyes locked on the officers. He wasn't just standing in a store anymore. He was standing in history, in that charged silence. He could hear his father's voice from 45 years ago. The night officers dragged him from their car in South Bronx, hands raised, unarmed, still pleading his innocence. His father never came home. That memory had built the man Jamal became, a Yale graduate, a federal judge, a man who believed that justice was the only weapon worth carrying. But now, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of Lennox convenience, justice felt like a ghost, watching, waiting, silent. Rosa Martinez, the cashier, froze behind the counter. Her fingers hovered above the keypad, trembling. She wanted to say something, but the look in Brennan's eyes, a kind of fury that dared anyone to challenge it, kept her still. A teenage boy by the snack aisle, Derek Young, slowly raised his phone, his hand shaking, trying not to draw attention. The red light blinked. The world was about to see. "Sir," Jamal said evenly, his voice calm, every syllable chosen with surgical control. "You've made a mistake." Brennan sneered. "No mistake. Pal, I know stolen cards when I see one. You think your fancy clothes fool anyone? Kneel down and pick it up." The insult cut deeper than Brennan knew. To kneel. That word carried generations of pain. Jamal's father had refused to kneel too, and it had cost him his life. Jamal's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. His heart pounded in his chest like the slow ticking of a courtroom clock. The other customers watched, afraid to interfere. An older woman whispered, "Lord." "Not again," someone else muttered. "He should just do what the officer says." The air was thick with judgment and fear, an old dance Harlem had seen too many times. Brennan took a step closer, his boots squeaking against the tile. "You think you're better than me? Huh?" His hand twitched near his hip, not on a weapon, but on instinct. Jamal didn't blink. He simply said, "I'm not here to prove anything. Just let me pay and go home. Not until I say so." Brennan barked. His voice cracked with something more than anger. It was insecurity, the kind born of years in a system that taught him to fear the very people he swore to protect. Rosa finally found her voice. "Officer, please, he didn't do anything. He just gave me his card." "I saw." "Quiet!" Brennan snapped, pointing at her like she was an accomplice. "You want to lose your job too?" The room shrank around them. Jamal's card still lay there, small, silent, and shining under the cheap light. But it wasn't about the card anymore. It was about dignity. It was about a test he'd been forced to take his whole life. Jamal slowly reached into his jacket, not for the card, but for his wallet. He laid it on the counter and opened it, revealing his driver's license, his federal ID, even a small badge engraved with the seal of the U.S. District Court. But he didn't show it. Not yet. He wanted to see how far this man would go. "Officer," he said softly, "you're escalating a situation that doesn't exist." Brennan's lip curled. "You think I don't know your kind? I've been doing this for 20 years. You people always play the victim. Always." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Derek's camera caught everything. Brennan's posture, his aggression, the veins pulsing at his neck. Jamal's stillness made the whole thing even more unbearable. It was like watching two worlds collide. Power built on fear versus power built on discipline. When Brennan finally reached down and grabbed the card off the floor himself, he slammed it on the counter and said, "Go ahead, pay. But don't think I won't remember your face." Jamal held his gaze for a long second. "You'll remember it," he said quietly. "For reasons you can't imagine." Then he paid, picked up his bag, and walked out. Calm, deliberate, leaving silence behind like a verdict. The doorbell jingled as he stepped into the cold Harlem air, but behind him, something had already started to unravel. Derek posted the video. Rosa couldn't sleep, and Brennan, shaken but defiant, called his old friend, Captain Harlan White. "Got a problem," Brennan said. "Some guy trying to make me look bad. Claims I harassed him." Harlan laughed, the kind of laugh that carried history. "Don't worry, I'll cover you, like always." That single sentence, casual and cruel, set everything in motion. Jamal went home, his wrist sore where Brennan had grabbed him, the red marks forming faint bruises. He sat at his desk in his Brooklyn apartment, the walls lined with law books and framed degrees. His son Marcus walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Dad, what happened to your hand?" "Just a misunderstanding," Jamal said softly, but inside, he knew it wasn't. It was a wound deeper than skin, a reminder that no title, no robe, no law degree could shield a black man from prejudice. That night, he opened his laptop, logged into Justice Track, the app he'd designed to monitor police misconduct nationwide, and began entering the details. He added Officer Kyle Brennan's name. Within minutes, data flooded in, 52 complaints, 67% against black individuals, 60% of his arrests never prosecuted. The numbers glowed like proof of a disease that too many refused to name. Jamal uploaded the photo of his wrist, the time-stamped video link from Derek, and Rosa's statement. He didn't do it out of anger. He did it out of duty, to his father, to his son, to the truth. He didn't know it yet, but this single act would shake the very foundations of New York's police system. As the clock struck midnight, Jamal closed his laptop and looked at a framed photo on his desk. His father smiling in a worn police uniform from a different time. He whispered, "I'll finish what you started." Across town, in a dim NYPD office, Captain Harlan White stared at a message on his phone. Complaint filed by Jamal Thompson. His face darkened. "Not this time," he muttered, deleting the record before it could reach internal affairs. "I told you, Kyle. I've got you covered." And in that moment, two paths crossed again, one built on truth, the other on corruption. The war for justice in Harlem had just begun. 3 days later, the air inside NYPD headquarters carried a stale chill, the kind that seeps into your bones and never leaves. Officer Kyle Brennan sat in a narrow gray chair before the Internal Affairs panel, his uniform crisp, his jaw tight. Across from him sat Lieutenant Elena Torres, her sharp eyes unmoved, and Investigator Daniel Chen, who quietly typed notes, recording every hesitation, every flicker of guilt. Brennan spoke with the confidence of a man who'd been through hundreds of interrogations. "I followed instinct," he said flatly. "Guy looked nervous. Matched a theft suspect we were briefed on last week. I acted to prevent a crime." Torres didn't blink. "You were off duty. Officer Brennan." And the man you accused, Jamal Thompson, has no criminal record. You ripped his card from his hand, threw it on the floor, and ordered him to kneel. Explain that to me. Brennan's lips tightened. You don't know the streets like I do. 20 years on the force teaches you things your textbooks don't. Instinct keeps you alive. Chen leaned forward. Instinct or prejudice? Brennan's eyes darted toward him, but before he could answer, Torres pressed a button. The room filled with the sound of his own voice from the store video. Pick it up, boy. The silence that followed was heavier than any judgment. Brennan's jaw clenched. That video's out of context. Torres didn't respond. You're right. Context matters, she said, leaning back. And the context is a man who's filed 52 complaints against you. 67% involve black individuals. Do you know how that looks, Officer Brennan? It looks like I do my job. He shot back. I patrol high-crime areas. I deal with whoever breaks the law. Chen slid a printed chart across the table. Your arrest reports show something different. 60% of your arrests never went to prosecution. Why is that? Officer? He shifted in his chair. That's not on me. The DA cuts deals. You know how this city works. Torres folded her hands. We also know Captain Harlan White signed off on all your disciplinary reviews, every single one. Brennan's silence said everything. Down the hall, behind a locked office door, Harlan White scrolled through emails on his computer, deleting one after another, internal alerts about the complaint Jamal had filed, flagged by the Justice Oversight Board. He deleted them all, then typed a message on his phone, handled, "Keep quiet." Moments later, Rosa Martinez received the text. Her hands shook as she read it. Stop talking or lose your job. The message was unsigned, but she knew who it was from. She turned off her phone and closed the blinds of her small apartment above the bodega, whispering a prayer for protection. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Jamal sat at his home office desk, surrounded by stacks of files and an open laptop glowing with the interface of his app, Justice Track. His son Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching his father with silent admiration. You're really gonna take on the NYPD, aren't you? The boy asked. Jamal smiled faintly. I'm not taking them on. Son, I'm holding them accountable. On his screen, the data was undeniable. Brennan's name highlighted in red, next to rows of statistics that spoke louder than any courtroom argument. 52 citizen complaints, 12 internal investigations, 0 convictions, all closed under insufficient evidence. The pattern was clear, damning, and familiar. These numbers don't lie, Jamal murmured, but people will try to bury them. They always do. He clicked on a tab showing broader data, 2024 national policing stats. Black individuals stopped 2.9 times more often, killed 2.8 times more often, 1,365 police killings nationwide, only 32 officers charged. Jamal exhaled slowly, the glow of the screen reflecting in his tired eyes. You see this, Marcus? That's why I built this app, so no one's story disappears into a report drawer again. Marcus nodded, voice low. Grandpa would be proud. Jamal paused. That name, Grandpa, always hit differently. Your grandfather, he said, didn't have a phone to record what happened. The world just took the officer's word. But not anymore. We have evidence now. Truth has witnesses. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short, venomous. You don't know who you're messing with. Stop before you lose more than your pride. Jamal stared at it for a long time, then locked the phone and looked out the window toward the city lights. Harlem glowed in the distance, alive and restless. A city that both raised and scarred him. He whispered under his breath, You can threaten me, but you can't silence me. Back at headquarters, Brennan stormed out of the internal affairs room, slamming the door behind him. Torres and Chen exchanged a glance. "He's lying," Chen said. "You can feel it." Torres nodded. "And he's being protected." She turned to the window overlooking the city skyline. "Find everything you can on Captain White." That night, in the quiet of his office, Harlan called Brennan. "Listen to me carefully. You'll be fine. I'll make sure this complaint never sees daylight." Brennan exhaled in relief. "I owe you, man." "You already do," Harlan replied, his tone dark. "You remember what happened in 009, right? You covered for me then. I'm returning the favor." There was a pause. "What if this Thompson guy pushes it?" Brennan asked. "Then we push back harder." Harlan smirked. "You forget who runs this department." But he underestimated Jamal. That same night, Jamal submitted a formal testimony to Internal Affairs. He detailed the incident precisely. Every word, every action, accompanied by time-stamped photos of his wrist bruises and a notarized statement from Rosa. But he deliberately omitted one fact: his identity as a federal judge. He wanted his case judged by truth, not title. In his statement, he wrote, "No man, no matter his uniform or badge, should have the power to humiliate another without consequence." It was both evidence and a declaration. The next morning, Derek Young, the teenager who filmed the video, uploaded a longer version online. Within hours, it spread across social media. Hashtags weren't needed. The images spoke for themselves. Brennan's aggression, Jamal's composure, the stunned silence of witnesses. News outlets picked it up. Internal Affairs was forced to reopen the file, this time under public scrutiny, inside the precinct. Tension grew. Officers whispered about the video, some disgusted, others defensive. "Man had it coming," one muttered. "You can't talk back to a cop," another replied quietly. "Didn't look like talking back to me." The blue wall was starting to crack. Torres, reviewing the footage again, said to Chen, "Whoever this guy is, he's smarter than he looks. Calm, collected, never raised his voice, like he's done this before." Chen frowned. "Maybe he has." Across town, Jamal met with a trusted contact from the Department of Justice, Sandra Brooks. She had seen the video, too. "You're handling this right," she told him, voice steady but firm. "But be careful. When you threaten power, power pushes back." Jamal nodded. "I'm ready." Sandra studied him. "No one ever really is." Later that evening, Harlan received a call from a blocked number. "Captain White," the voice said, calm and measured. "We're aware of the interference in the Thompson file. Delete one more record, and it won't just be your badge you lose." Harlan froze. He didn't recognize the voice, but it sounded official. Federal. That night, he sat alone in his office, whiskey glass in hand, staring at his reflection in the window. "You don't scare me," he muttered. But his hands shook, deep down. He knew the tide was turning. The system he had protected for decades was about to face something it couldn't intimidate. A man of law who'd mastered its every weapon. And as the city slept, the first threads of the cover-up began to unravel. Justice wasn't coming quietly. It was coming with receipts, witnesses, and data too loud to ignore. Jamal Thompson wasn't just fighting for himself now. He was about to expose an entire system built on silence. The game had changed, and for the first time, those in power were the ones afraid of what daylight might reveal. The following morning, Jamal walked into the Internal Affairs Division, not as a judge, not as a man of authority, but as a citizen seeking justice. He wore no robe, no badge of power, just a dark blue suit and calm eyes that hid the storm within. As he entered the room, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Lieutenant Elena Torres and Investigator Daniel Chen sat across a long table covered with files, digital tablets, and the printed transcript of his original statement. A camera recorded from the corner of the room. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming," Torres began, polite but cautious. "Before we start, I should inform you this interview is being recorded and may be used in administrative or criminal proceedings." Jamal nodded. "That's fine. I came prepared." He opened his briefcase and laid out photos of the faint red bruises still visible on his wrist, a printed transcript of the video Derek had recorded, and 2 written witness statements. Rosa's and Derek's. His movements were methodical, the kind that made investigators nervous because they hinted at control. "Everything you see here is verifiable," he said. "What you do with it will tell me more about this department than any report could." Torres exchanged a glance with Chen, who adjusted his glasses and flipped through the evidence. "You seem familiar with this process, Mr. Thompson," Chen said. Jamal's voice didn't waver. "I've spent 20 years inside courtrooms. I know how truth gets buried under paperwork. I'm here to make sure it doesn't." Torres leaned forward. "You said in your statement that Officer Brennan accused you of theft without cause, threw your credit card on the ground, and ordered you to kneel. That's correct?" Jamal nodded once. "Yes." His words were, "Pick it up, boy." The room fell silent for a brief, loaded second. Even Torres's posture stiffened. Chen broke the pause. "Did you provoke him in any way?" Jamal looked him dead in the eye. "No, but men like him don't need provocation. They just need a target." Outside the glass wall, Harlan White stood watching, his expression cold. He had pushed to monitor the session, though Torres hadn't invited him. He whispered to another officer, "End this quick. I want it closed today." Inside, Jamal caught a reflection of him in the glass but said nothing. He had expected this. He had seen the system protect itself before. When the questioning ended, Torres extended her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We'll review and follow up." Jamal shook it politely, collected his materials, and left the building without a word to anyone else. But as soon as he stepped outside, his phone buzzed, an alert from Justice Track. A new data anomaly had been detected in the NYPD's misconduct archives. Someone inside the system was altering files connected to Brennan. Jamal hurried home, sat before his computer, and opened the encrypted Justice Track dashboard. He typed a quick query. "Brennan, Kyle, complaint deletions, linked supervisors." The screen blinked, then produced a chain of access logs, 15 deleted complaint files, each deletion tied to the same user ID, Captain Harlan White. Jamal leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "So that's how deep it goes," he muttered. His app's monitoring algorithm had caught the changes within minutes of Harlan's actions, leaving a digital trail that couldn't be erased. He cross-referenced other cases and found more. Patterns of suppression stretching back 10 years. Same captain, same excuse, administrative error. Some of the deleted complaints involved serious misconduct, unlawful searches, racial slurs, excessive force. He downloaded the files, encrypted them, and stored copies on a private server. It was no longer just about Brennan's insult. This was a web of corruption built over decades. That night, Brennan and Harlan met at a bar in Midtown. Far from precinct eyes, the low hum of jazz couldn't drown the tension between them. Brennan nursed a whiskey. "You sure we can kill this?" he asked. Harlan smirked. "Already done. Internal affairs will lose interest. Torres knows where her paycheck comes from." Brennan frowned. "That guy, Thompson, he's not ordinary. There's something about him." Harlan chuckled. "He's just another activist with a laptop and a bruised ego." But Brennan wasn't convinced. "No," he said slowly. "You didn't see his eyes. He looked in control, like he's seen this game before." Harlan waved him off. "Even if he files a lawsuit, he'll lose. We've buried bigger." Across town, Jamal walked the late-night streets of Harlem, the hum of traffic blending with his thoughts. He had lived here most of his life, but tonight the city felt different. Watchful. Halfway down the block, he noticed a dark sedan parked too long near a hydrant when he crossed the street. It moved. When he stopped, so did it. Jamal's pace quickened. The car crept forward. Headlights dimmed. He turned sharply into an alley, heart pounding, not from fear, but calculation. He ducked behind a dumpster, waited, and saw the car roll past the alley's mouth before disappearing. Someone was watching him, and he knew exactly who had the reach to make that happen. He pulled out his phone, opened Justice Track, and activated the trace feature, linking his GPS to any nearby surveillance cameras. Within minutes, the app captured the car's plate, government issued, registered to a precinct vehicle pool. "Got you," he whispered, when he returned home. Marcus was still awake, working on homework. "Dad, why are you breathing so heavy?" Jamal smiled faintly. "Just took the long way home." Marcus looked unconvinced. "You're not telling me something?" Jamal sat beside him. "Son, there are moments in life when doing what's right puts you at risk. But that's when it matters most." Marcus frowned. "You're not scared?" "Of them," Jamal said softly. "No, but I'm scared of what happens if we don't stand up." He pulled up the Justice Track dashboard, showing Marcus the screen full of data points and names. "Every dot you see here is a person someone tried to silence. This system only works if we keep shining light on it. Remember that." Over the next days, Jamal compiled his evidence into a confidential report for the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, forwarding it directly to Sandra Brooks. She called him within hours. "Jamal, this is serious," she said, her tone low. "If these files are real, we're looking at a coordinated cover-up, not isolated misconduct. Are you sure you want to be the face of this?" He answered without hesitation. "If not me, then who?" Meanwhile, inside NYPD headquarters, Harlan felt the pressure tightening. Internal Affairs had requested full access to his logs after an anonymous federal tip, Jamal's doing. Though Harlan didn't know it yet, Brennan grew anxious, pacing the hallways, sweating through his shirt. "You said this was handled," he hissed during a call. "It is," Harlan snapped. "Just stick to the story." But Brennan's confidence cracked. He had seen his name spreading online, his badge number trending, his neighbors whispering. For the first time, the system he had hidden behind wasn't protecting him. It was watching him too. That night, Jamal received another anonymous message. "They know who you are. Walk away." He read it twice, then smiled bitterly. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were telling a federal judge to walk away from justice. He turned to Marcus, who was sitting on the couch watching a basketball game. "Son," he said quietly, "what would you do if someone threatened what you believe in?" Marcus looked up. "I'd double down." Jamal nodded. "That's exactly what I plan to do." By the weekend, Justice Track flagged a new update. His own name was now under surveillance by NYPD's internal network. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "They're building a case," he whispered. But little did they know, so was he. And his case wasn't built on fear or gossip. It was built on facts, witnesses, and law. He knew the next step would take everything, his reputation, his safety, his peace. But he was ready, because in 3 weeks, fate would put him exactly where destiny wanted him, in courtroom 7B, not as a victim, but as the one man with the authority to judge them all. Late one evening, Jamal sat alone in his Brooklyn home office, the glow of his computer casting long shadows across the room. He was scrolling through lines of data from Justice Track, numbers, names, timestamps, each one telling a story of bias buried behind bureaucratic language. He paused at a new report his algorithm had generated. Search Disparity Index. Officer Brennan. 6.2% higher searches on black individuals. 1,365 police killings recorded in 2024, 2.8x higher rate for black citizens. The numbers weren't just data. They were confessions written in code. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, and whispered to himself, "The numbers never lie. People do." His phone vibrated, a message from Rosa Martinez. "I need to see you. Not safe to talk by phone." 10 minutes later, Jamal was on the subway to Harlem, hat pulled low, mind racing, when he reached her apartment. Rosa looked pale, frightened. "He called me again," she whispered. "Captain White. He said if I keep talking, I'll lose my job. And maybe more." Jamal took a deep breath. "You did the right thing. Rosa, you told the truth." But her voice trembled. "Truth doesn't protect people like us." Jamal met her eyes. "It will. Not today, but it will." He handed her a card. "Call this number if anything happens. It's a DOJ contact. They'll protect you." Rosa nodded, clutching it like a lifeline. Meanwhile, at NYPD headquarters, Captain Harlan White sat in his dimly lit office, reviewing his falsified reports. He had deleted more evidence, rewritten timestamps, and adjusted complaint summaries to make Brennan's record appear clean. The lies looked official, polished, and final. But guilt crept up his spine like static. He poured himself a drink and stared at a photo of his younger brother, the one who had been killed during a robbery 30 years earlier. "You were 17, Harlan muttered under his breath. "A black kid shot you dead for $50. They never caught him. You think I can ever forget that?" His hatred had started there, small and personal. But over the years, it had hardened into prejudice disguised as policy. Every time he covered for Brennan, every time he dismissed a complaint, he told himself he was balancing a cosmic scale no one else could see. "This city owes me justice," he whispered, not realizing how twisted the words had become. Down the hall, Brennan was pacing like a man trapped in his own mind. He had overheard Harlan talking to another officer earlier that day, words that made his stomach drop. "If this Thompson thing explodes," Harlan had said, "we'll say Brennan acted alone. I'll deny everything." Now Brennan sat in his car outside the precinct, hands gripping the steering wheel, sweat forming on his brow. "He's gonna hang me out to dry," he muttered. The man who had once been his protector was ready to sacrifice him to save himself. Brennan reached for his phone and scrolled through his call history. Hesitating, he wanted to call Harlan, to demand loyalty. But deep down, he already knew what the answer would be. Across the river. Jamal sat with his son Marcus, trying to act normal over dinner. Marcus noticed his father's distraction. "Dad," he said, "you've been quiet all week." Jamal smiled faintly. "Just thinking about a case." "The same one with the officer?" Marcus pressed. Jamal hesitated. "Yes, but it's bigger now. It's not just about one officer. It's about a system that keeps pretending it doesn't see what's in front of it." Marcus nodded slowly, trying to understand. "So what are you gonna do?" Jamal looked out the window, his reflection merging with the city skyline. Something they'll never expect. The next morning, Jamal received an official notice from the federal judiciary scheduling his next case assignment. United States New York Police Department, Civil Rights Division. He froze, reading it twice. The case involved allegations of systemic racial bias, data falsification, and civil rights violations, and the presiding judge, effective immediately, was him, courtroom 7B. His chest tightened. "Of all the cases in New York," he whispered, "they gave me this one." It felt like destiny had walked right up to his doorstep. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he closed the file and exhaled. So be it. Later that evening, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous number. This time. The message was clear and cruel. Stop digging or lose everything you love. A photo followed. Marcus leaving school. Jamal's blood ran cold. He clenched the phone until his knuckles turned white, then called Sandra Brooks from the DOJ. "They're threatening my family now," he said quietly. "You need protection detail?" she asked. "No." Jamal said, "If I bring in guards, they win. I'll protect my own." "Be careful," Sandra warned. "You're dealing with men who think badges make them gods." At the same time, Brennan's conscience was beginning to fracture. He couldn't sleep. He replayed the moment in the store over and over, his own voice, the look in Jamal's eyes, the crowd's silence. It wasn't just guilt, it was recognition. "He wasn't just some guy," Brennan murmured, staring at the ceiling. "He looked at me like he knew me, like he saw through me." His therapist had warned him years ago about untreated PTSD from his military service, but he'd refused help. Now it all came back. The fear, the anger, the faces he couldn't forget. "Maybe I did cross a line," he whispered, at the precinct. Harlan noticed Brennan's hesitation and snapped. "You keep your mouth shut. You hear me? This Thompson thing is handled." But Brennan's voice was quieter than usual. "It's not handled. It's just hidden." Harlan slammed his fist on the desk. "You think you can stand on moral ground now? After all I've done to protect you?" Brennan looked him dead in the eye. "You didn't protect me, Captain. You protected yourself." The tension between them was thick enough to choke on. Harlan's eyes burned with rage. "If you turn on me, I'll bury you so deep the media won't even remember your name." Brennan didn't answer. He just walked out, closing the door softly behind him, a small act of rebellion that would soon change everything. That night, Jamal sat by the window, reviewing files one last time. His father's photo was still on the desk. "That same proud smile frozen in time," Jamal whispered. "They tried to silence you. They won't silence me." He opened his laptop, pulled up the internal NYPD database one last time, and downloaded every file tied to Captain Harlan White. Each document was encrypted and uploaded to a secure DOJ server. It was done. The truth was in motion. Minutes later, his phone buzzed again. Another text. This one different. "We know you're the judge." Jamal stared at it, heartbeat steady. There was no more hiding. The battle lines were drawn. He turned off the light, leaned back in his chair, and said softly to the empty room, "Then I'll see you in my courtroom." Across town, Brennan sat in his car, gripping his badge. He knew what was coming. He could either stay silent and be destroyed with Harlan, or tell the truth and face the consequences. For the first time in his career, he wasn't sure which was worse, and so the stage was set. On one side, a judge armed with evidence and purpose. On the other, a captain desperate to protect his lies and a cop trapped between guilt and loyalty. The city didn't know it yet, but in just a few days, the walls of power in Manhattan would tremble. Courtroom 7B was about to become the battleground where justice itself would be put on trial. The morning of the trial dawned gray over Manhattan, a kind of stillness that felt like the city was holding its breath. Courtroom 7B buzzed with quiet anticipation long before the gavel struck. Reporters lined the benches, cameras waited outside, and every seat was filled. Community leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens who had seen the viral video and came to witness justice unfold. At precisely 9 o'clock a.m., the side door opened, and Jamal Thompson stepped to the bench. The room went silent. Brennan froze in his seat. Harlan's jaw slackened. For the first time, they saw him not as the quiet man in the corner store, but as the Honorable Judge Jamal R. Thompson, United States Federal Court. He placed his papers on the desk, looked over his glasses, and said in that calm, measured tone that made every word feel heavy, "Court is now in session." The clerk called the case. United States v. the New York Police Department, et al. And Jamal's gaze shifted to the defense table. There sat Brennan, in uniform, eyes sunken and nervous, and beside him, Captain Harlan White, trying to appear composed but visibly sweating through his collar. Across from them stood DOJ attorney Sandra Brooks, poised, unflinching, her presence like a storm about to break. Sandra rose first. "Your Honor," she began, "this case represents not a single act of misconduct but a pattern, a system of bias and abuse, perpetuated under the protection of authority." She turned toward the jury, clicking a remote. The courtroom monitors lit up with data and images. In 2024, 1,365 civilians were killed by police. Black citizens were 2.8 times more likely to die in those encounters. Officer Kyle Brennan alone had 52 civilian complaints, 67% from black individuals. None resulted in discipline. Why? Because his superior, Captain Harlan White, buried them. The screen displayed an evidence chart. Justice Track Analytics, complete with time-stamped deletions and internal log IDs tracing back to Harlan's terminal. Gasps rippled through the room. Sandra continued. "What you're about to see is the cost of silence." The video began to play. The same footage Derek Young had filmed at Lennox Convenience appeared on screen. The sound filled the room, Brennan's voice booming. "Pick it up, boy!" Some jurors winced. Others turned away. Brennan's hands clenched on the table. Harlan stared straight ahead, jaw locked, when the clip ended. Sandra paused, letting the silence settle. Then she said, "The man you humiliated, the man you tried to discredit, was this man?" She pointed toward the bench. "A federal judge, a father, a citizen of the United States." Jamal didn't move. His face remained unreadable. But inside, he felt every heartbeat echo the memory of that day. The defense attorney, Nathan Reed, stood next. "Your Honor, my clients acted on instinct, not malice. Officer Brennan was off duty, responding to what he believed was a theft attempt. The department made administrative errors. Yes, but that does not constitute criminal intent." Sandra immediately countered. "Instinct doesn't order a man to kneel because of the color of his skin. Instinct doesn't delete 15 complaint files. And instinct doesn't text witnesses to stay quiet or lose your job." She turned back to the bench. Captain White's intent was not to protect justice. It was to protect himself. Harlan was called to the stand. His steps were slow, but his eyes carried the defiance of a man who had lived too long believing the rules didn't apply to him. Sandra faced him. "Captain White, did you authorize deletion of internal misconduct files?" "I managed records as per department policy," he replied. "Under which policy?" she pressed. He hesitated. "Administrative review." Sandra raised an eyebrow. 15 times? Involving the same officer? Convenient, isn't it? "I don't recall the specifics." She leaned forward. "Then allow me to refresh your memory." She projected an internal email, time-stamped, signed, his name in bold, handled, "Keep quiet." Gasps filled the room again. Harlan's voice cracked. "That was taken out of context." "Context?" Sandra echoed. "The context is corruption." She looked at Jamal. "Permission to treat the witness as hostile?" "Granted," Jamal said firmly. The questioning turned brutal. For 30 minutes, Sandra dismantled his every excuse, showing falsified logs, financial kickbacks, even a prior whistleblower report he had buried. Harlan's mask began to crumble. Finally, in frustration, he shouted, "You think you understand what it's like? My brother was killed by a black criminal. I swore it would never happen again. The courtroom fell silent. Sandra's voice softened, not with sympathy, but gravity. And how many innocent men did you punish for one man's crime? Harlan had no answer. He looked toward Jamal, eyes flickering between defiance and guilt. For the first time, he saw not an adversary, but the son of someone like the man he had hated. Next, Brennan was called. His lawyer advised him not to testify, but he insisted. I need to speak. He took the stand. Shoulders heavy, Sandra asked. Officer Brennan, do you deny accusing Mr. Thompson of theft without cause? Brennan swallowed hard. No. Do you deny throwing his card on the floor? No. Do you deny ordering him to kneel? His eyes dropped. No. The courtroom was still. Sandra's tone softened. Then why did you do it? Brennan hesitated. Because I was angry. I've been angry a long time. About the streets, the war, the job. Everything feels like a threat after a while. He paused. But that day, I looked at him, and he didn't flinch. He didn't shout or fight. He just looked at me like I wasn't worth the badge I wore. And maybe I wasn't. From the bench. Jamal studied him quietly. The words weren't absolution, but they were the first trace of truth Brennan had ever spoken aloud. Sandra stepped closer. Officer Brennan, are you aware your captain covered up your misconduct? Yes. Did he ever ask you to lie? Brennan nodded slowly. He told me he'd handle it, that no one would ever find out. And today, you're confirming that on the record? Yes. His voice trembled. I'm done protecting people who'd never protect me. Harlan's face turned red. You liar, he barked. You'd be in prison years ago if it weren't for me, Brennan shot back. Then maybe that's where I should have been. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. Order! When the room calmed, Jamal leaned forward slightly. Captain White, Officer Brennan, this court isn't here to settle grudges. It's here to find truth, and truth has finally spoken. He nodded to Sandra. Proceed. The final exhibit appeared on screen, a chain of internal memos proving Harlan's direct interference in 23 prior cases. Each line was a nail in the coffin. By the time Sandra finished, Harlan's defense had disintegrated. His lawyer sat in silence, knowing the outcome was sealed. As closing arguments began, Sandra addressed the jury one last time. Justice is not revenge. It's correction. These men believed they could manipulate truth and still wear its uniform. Today, you have the power to say no more. Her voice cracked slightly, but her resolve didn't. No badge stands above accountability. No man stands below dignity. The courtroom was utterly still when Jamal finally spoke, his tone steady, deliberate. This court will recess until verdict deliberation. He rose, gavel in hand, and looked at the faces before him, some fearful, some remorseful, some hopeful. Then he said quietly, When justice is delayed, humanity pays the interest. The gavel struck. The sound echoed through the chamber like a final warning, one that neither Brennan nor Harlan would ever forget. And as he stepped down from the bench, Jamal knew this was no longer just a trial. It was history unfolding, written in truth, pain, and redemption. 3 days later, the verdict came down like thunder across New York City. The courtroom was packed once more, the air so heavy that even breathing felt reverent. Jamal Thompson sat at the bench, robe crisp, posture still, every inch the embodiment of calm authority. The jury forewoman rose, paper trembling slightly in her hands. In the matter of United States v. New York Police Department, we, the jury, find the defendants, Officer Kyle Brennan and Captain Harlan White, guilty of violating the civil rights of the plaintiff under Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code. The words rippled through the room like a seismic wave. Murmurs broke out. Reporters scribbled furiously, and Harlan's face drained of color. Brennan lowered his head, eyes closed, a mix of exhaustion and relief flickering across his features. Jamal lifted the gavel but didn't strike it yet. He wanted the silence to breathe, for justice to linger before being formalized. Then, with a single sharp motion, he brought the gavel down. The verdict is entered. The echo was final. Sandra Brooks exhaled quietly at the prosecution table. For a brief second, her eyes met Jamal's. No words, just shared understanding. Across the aisle. Harlan whispered something to his lawyer, his voice trembling. Brennan sat motionless, his badge on the table before him, its shine dulled under the fluorescent light. Jamal straightened the papers before him, then looked out over the courtroom. Before this court proceeds to sentencing, I will make a statement. His tone was formal, but there was something deeply personal in his eyes. The law exists to restrain power, not to excuse it. What happened in that store, and what followed, were not mistakes. They were choices. Choices rooted in prejudice, sustained by silence, and protected by rank. The courtroom hung on every word. The Constitution does not ask for perfection from those who wear the badge, but it demands accountability, and this court will enforce that demand. He turned to Brennan first. Officer Brennan, your actions humiliated an innocent man. You abused your authority. And yet, this court acknowledges your willingness to tell the truth. You were a participant in corruption, but also the key to exposing it. That truth will not erase the harm you caused, but it may one day redeem it. Brennan nodded slowly, eyes glassy. For your actions, you are sentenced to 3 to 5 years in federal custody, with eligibility for parole after 36 months, contingent upon completion of trauma and bias rehabilitation. You are ordered to pay restitution of $100,000 to each verified victim of your unlawful conduct. You will forfeit your pension and all law enforcement privileges permanently. Brennan swallowed hard, barely managing a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. Jamal gave him a steady look, not pity, not anger, but solemn finality. Justice must heal, not humiliate. You will serve your time, and if you learn, then justice will have done its work. Then Jamal turned to Harlan. Captain White, he said, his voice lower, heavier. Your crimes go deeper. You corrupted the system you swore to uphold. You falsified reports, silenced witnesses, and buried the truth for personal vengeance. He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. You used your badge not as a shield, but as a weapon. This court cannot and will not overlook that. Harlan met his gaze, pride still flickering beneath the ruin. I did what I thought was right, he muttered. Jamal's expression didn't change. Hatred disguised as justice is still hatred. You have not only failed your oath, you've stained the very institution you claim to defend. His gavel hovered above the block for a long moment. You are hereby sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to forfeit all retirement benefits. Furthermore, this court recommends you enter mandatory rehabilitation for racial bias and accountability training upon release. Harlan's shoulders sagged, the last thread of his authority unraveling. You'll never change anything, he said quietly. Jamal looked at him steadily. I already have. After the sentencing, Jamal ordered a judicial review of 23 prior NYPD cases connected to Harlan's oversight, each one flagged for potential civil rights violations. He also issued a standing directive for the department to implement a mandatory 50-hour anti-bias training program for all officers. Supervised by civilian oversight committees, accountability is not punishment, he said. It's the foundation of trust. When the court adjourned, the crowd outside erupted, Activists cheering, reporters shouting questions, camera flashes lighting the marble steps. Inside. Jamal stayed behind a moment, gathering his papers. He needed quiet. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by something heavier. A deep ache that comes after doing what is right but knowing what it cost. He looked down at the empty witness stand, remembering the faces, Rosa trembling with fear, Derek's bravery behind the lens, Brennan's confession, Harlan's bitterness. Each one was a mirror of what justice demanded from all of them. Truth, no matter how painful. Later, in his chambers. Sandra knocked lightly before entering. "Congratulations, Your Honor," she said softly. "You didn't just win a case. You set a precedent." Jamal smiled faintly. "Precedents are paper. What matters is whether they change people." Sandra nodded. "They will. You showed that the robe doesn't protect a man. It obligates him." She hesitated before adding, "You know they'll come after you for this. Media, politics, maybe even your colleagues." Jamal chuckled quietly. "Let them. I didn't take this bench to be liked." That evening, he drove home through Harlem. The city looked different now, brighter somehow, but not naive, on a corner. He saw people gathered around Derek, who was being interviewed by a local news crew. Rosa stood nearby, watching, no longer afraid. Jamal smiled and kept driving. When he reached home, Marcus was waiting on the porch. "Dad," he said, "everyone's talking about you on the news. They're saying you changed the system." Jamal set down his briefcase and sat beside him. "Change doesn't happen in a courtroom, son. It happens when people stop being afraid to tell the truth." Marcus nodded slowly. "You weren't afraid?" Jamal looked at him, eyes warm. "Of course I was, but courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do in spite of it." They sat in silence for a moment, the city noise fading into the distance. Marcus broke it softly. "Do you think Officer Brennan meant it, when he said he wanted to change?" Jamal thought for a long time before answering. "Maybe, and maybe that's enough to start." He looked up at the night sky, a faint glow of Harlem's lights reflecting in the clouds. "You can't undo the past, Marcus, but you can make it mean something." Before bed, Jamal opened his laptop and checked Justice Track. The app was now trending nationally. Thousands of new users had joined, uploading evidence, sharing stories, creating a wave of collective accountability. It was working. For the first time in decades, transparency had outpaced silence. Jamal closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "For every father who never got his day in court, this one's for you." But even in victory, there was no celebration, only resolve. The city had begun to change. Yes, but trust, Jamal knew, could not be legislated. It had to be earned. And as the night deepened over Brooklyn, he realized that this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Justice had spoken, but healing would take generations. And still, for the first time since he was a child watching his father's casket lowered into the ground, Jamal felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. 3 months later, New York felt like a city exhaling after years of holding its breath. The verdict in United States v. NYPD had not only shaken the department, it had redefined accountability across the nation. Officer Kyle Brennan was serving his sentence at a federal facility in upstate New York. Gone was the bravado, the arrogance, the defensive pride. In its place was quiet acceptance. Each morning, he joined group sessions for veterans and law enforcement officers struggling with trauma and bias, confronting memories he had spent decades burying. Some nights he wrote letters he never sent, to Jamal, to Rosa, even to his late father. He was learning, painfully. That redemption wasn't found in apologies spoken aloud, but in the discipline of change. Captain Harlan White, once a man of unshakable pride, now lived in a small rehabilitation center for bias recovery and emotional counseling. His wife had filed for divorce, his pension was gone, and the badge he once cherished had become a symbol of everything he destroyed. When reporters asked for comment, he refused. The man who silenced others had finally run out of words. Meanwhile, the NYPD began its long climb toward reform. The Department of Justice, under Sandra Brooks's oversight, implemented Jamal's court-mandated changes, 50 hours of mandatory anti-bias training for all officers, a civilian oversight board with investigative power, and a transparent misconduct database accessible to the public. The changes didn't come easily. Some officers protested, some quit, but others stayed, and for the first time. Young cadets entered the academy understanding that the oath to serve wasn't a shield against consequence. Jamal's ruling had rippled through every precinct, forcing conversations that had been buried for decades. At the same time, Harlem became a symbol of what accountability could look like. Murals appeared along Lenox Avenue, one showing Jamal's face above the words, "Justice Needs Witnesses." Derek Young, the teenager who filmed the original video, had started a nonprofit called the Lens Project, training young people to document injustice safely and ethically. "Every phone can be a truth machine," he told a local news crew, Rosa Martinez, who once feared losing her job, now managed her own convenience store just a few blocks from the old one. On her wall hung a framed quote from Jamal's ruling, "Dignity is not negotiable," at home in Brooklyn. Jamal spent his mornings differently now, no longer rushing to chambers. He used his time mentoring young law students through a virtual program called Justice Track Scholars, funded by donations from civil rights organizations. Marcus, now 16, had become the program's unofficial tech advisor, upgrading the app his father created to include community alerts, real-time bias reports, and an educational feature teaching citizens how to document incidents lawfully. Together, father and son had turned a single act of defiance into a nationwide movement. One evening, while reviewing new data entries, Marcus looked up and said, "Dad, this thing's gone viral. People in Chicago, Atlanta, LA, they're using it everywhere." Jamal smiled, eyes weary but proud. "Good," he said. "Justice belongs to everyone, not just the courts." The national media couldn't get enough of him. The New York Times called him the judge who made America listen. He appeared before Congress 2 months after the verdict, not as a hero, but as a reformer. His testimony was calm and measured. "We cannot punish our way into justice. We must rebuild trust through truth and accountability. The robe does not make me immune. It makes me responsible." His words were replayed on news channels, quoted in editorials, and discussed in law schools across the country. For once, the conversation wasn't about division. It was about reconstruction. One afternoon, Jamal visited his father's grave in the Bronx. The cemetery was quiet, except for the hum of distant traffic. He stood before the headstone and laid a single white rose. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "Not for revenge, for repair." He stayed there for a long time, letting the wind carry his words away. That same weekend, Harlem filled with thousands for a peaceful march organized by the Lens Project. People carried signs reading, "Accountability is patriotism and justice needs witnesses." Jamal stood at the edge of the crowd with Marcus, blending in, watching. A woman in her 50s approached him, tears in her eyes. "Judge Thompson," she said softly, "my son was stopped by an officer last year for no reason. Your ruling changed how they handled it. They apologized. They released him. Thank you." Jamal nodded, humbled. "Ma'am, thank you. for raising a young man who stood his ground. She smiled and walked away, lost in the crowd. As the sun began to set, Jamal looked over the sea of faces, black, white, Latin, Asian, young, old, all marching together. The pain was still there, but so was progress. Harlem wasn't healed, but it was learning how to heal. Marcus lifted his phone and began recording, capturing the moment the way Derek once had months ago. "Why are you filming, son?" Jamal asked with a small smile. Marcus replied, "Because justice still needs witnesses." And in that moment, Jamal realized something profound. Justice wasn't a verdict. It was a continuum. It was every truth told, every camera raised, every voice refusing silence. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder, eyes glistening with pride and quiet sorrow. "Keep filming," he said. "The world still needs to see." As the crowd's chant rose into the evening sky, no more silence, no more fear. The camera panned over Harlem's streets, where truth had once been a whisper, but now thundered like a promise, and with that, the story closed not in vengeance, but in vision, a vision born from pain, carried by courage, and written forever in the words Jamal once spoke to his courtroom and now to the world: "Justice needs witnesses." Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in justice and truth.